Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
Brantley Gilbert returns to Grand Forks. Fired Up Tour 2020 with special guests Chase Rice and Brandon Lay. Alara Center, Saturday, May 2nd. Get tickets now at Ticketmaster.com. The brand new album Fire and Brimstone drops everywhere October 4th. Brantley Gilbert, live in concert. Check more at BrantleyGilbert.com.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks, home of the University of North Dakota. This is Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, October 14th. Under item 1, call to order, 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel, Dockler, Weber, Mock, Marshall, Sandy,
Here.
Veen. We have a quorum.
Great. I believe Mr. Weigel was going to be calling in as well, so I don't know if, no, shaking her head. Okay, well, we'll move on. Item 2.1, ordinance amending section 8-1503 relating to penalties for specified offenses. Did everybody have the chance to read the staff report provided by Mr. Swanson? Moved by Marshall. Second. Second by Veen. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and Mr. Weigel is on the phone. We're on the meeting. 2.2, reappointment to Special Assessment Commission of Brian Poyko. Moved by Veen, second by Marshall. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.3, lease amendment for the social detox facility. Ms. Richards, good evening.
Good evening. You may remember this item from when you're wearing your JDA hats. Social Detox leases space in 201 South 4th, which is owned by the JDA. Primarily leased to Center, but Social Detox does lease a small portion of that building. The JDA agreed to sell this building to Center in July. Part of the terms of that sale was that the lease that currently exists between the city and the JDA for Social Detox, which is a 5-year lease, under the terms of sale that the JDA agreed to, that would be extended to a 15-year lease with some pretty attractive renewal terms. Those are outlined in your staff report. So what we're asking for today is the city to agree to an amendment to that lease to extend it from the current 5-year lease at $1 a year to a 15-year lease at $1 a year, plus some, I hope, fairly minor changes that have been suggested by Center. Those are listed in the findings and analysis section regarding clarification of how utilities are to be prorated, maintenance and upkeep. There was an issue with how the determination of market rent would be made in year 18 when that provision would kick in. I think language has been crafted that will be satisfactory to all parties. The Center asked that the city carry insurance and then name Center as an additional insured due to the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund that the city participates in. It's not quite the right language, but I think, again, that can be worked out between the parties. I did get a response from John Workup late this afternoon. Those items that I just listed, I think that Center needs to talk to Mr. Workup to get the wording right, but I think we're pretty close on that. Mr. Workup did raise issues about, is it a 15-year lease or is it 15 years from the date that Center takes possession of the building? My understanding was it was a 15-year lease, but we have not tried to, listen to minutes. I don't know that we got into a discussion at that level. So any clarification that the city would like to provide in terms of your interpretation of that would certainly be welcome. But the point of my coming to you tonight is we have a sale scheduled to close at the end of November. Before the purchase agreement can be signed to proceed with that, we need to have an amendment in place that both parties agree to. So I'm asking for City Council tonight to approve a lease amendment between the city and the JDA. That lease would then be assumed by Center at closing. And so all the terms that you're agreeing to tonight would then attach to Center and Social Detox for the coming 15 years plus extension options.
Comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. So this is a little unusual because when last we heard this, we were up here as a different entity, as the Jobs Development Authority. This is a lease between the city and the JDA. So the intention, we're wearing slightly different hats here, but My understanding is that we were looking to amend the existing 5-year lease and making that 5-year lease a 15-year lease at $1 a year for the detox facility. So that was my understanding, and I would be happy to move approval of the staff recommended action, but it's going to be subject to city attorney review. We have Mr. Warkup here. We might as well
here he is.
have that discussion. So I'd be curious if there's any insight into the city attorney review at this time.
Mr. Warkup, anything exciting to shed?
Not particularly exciting, no, but Mr. Sandy, members of the committee, with respect to the term, from the staff report that was presented to the Growth Fund Committee and the JDA that stated June 17 of 2019 and July 1 of 2019, as I understand, it was a 15-year from the date that Center takes ownership, and that was the language that was out of the staff report that came to the JDA and to the Growth Fund Committee. So that was the reason for my question on, there was discussion and there is language in the staff report that it was 15 years from the date the center takes ownership, which would be within the next few months, I assume. And then there was a 3-year extension after that, again, still at $1 per year. After that 18-year period, the first 15 plus 3, then it goes into 5-year market rate renewals. That was my understanding of the committee and the Growth Fund's action before. So that's the reason for the question there. And then as far as the insurance issue, as you know, the city participates in the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. The Center Inc. wants them to be named as an additional insured. Insurance Reserve Fund will not do that. They represent and insure only municipal and governmental entities. They won't insure a private entity like Center Inc.
So would we have to take out a separate insurance policy then?
Well, if you
Or
were,
try to negotiate that
if you were
request
to
away?
take out a separate policy, then we've got to deal with the budget. The social detox has no budget that I'm aware of to pay for that type.
We don't have anyone from Center here this evening, do we?
No, Ms. Swanson was unable to attend. The issues that we discussed tonight have not yet been presented to Center. I would like to say I'm confident that when the insurance issue is explained, they will be understanding and accepting of what Mr. Warkup just said.
It's a sultry voice back there. So the main hang-up, the main two hang-ups that I'm hearing is this issue about insurance. We'll pitch it to Center and see how that goes. But the real hang-up for you, Mr. Warkup, is this issue of we're talking about an 18-year lease from now or a 15-year lease from now, because we're extending, what we're taking is a 5-year lease and extending it by 10 years and adding a 3-year renewal. That sounds for $1 a year, and that would be something that we are then handing off and hoping that Center would just assume that lease between the JDA and the city would now go Center and the city.
Correct.
So Detox would have another possibly up to another 15 years at $1 a year. It's hard to predict the future. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that's the question. The staff report before was 15 years from today's plus 3. And the way the lease is written, it's 15 days from 3 years ago plus 3.
And we can certainly, as Mr. Helmer reviews Mr. Warkup's verbiage, we can make sure that there's a meeting of the minds with Center's board as well as council and the JDA. I didn't even know this was an issue until a couple of hours ago, so this has been a little bit of a more complicated request than I anticipated. There is certainly time for this to come back if you would be more comfortable with that, or if you would approve it subject to concurrence by all the attorneys involved. You know, typically when we bring items to you, we're not discussing insurance and details like that. It's kind of the bigger issue, to my mind, is the definition of what is this 15-year lease.
So tonight, as as the committee of the whole, we're making a recommendation for council to consider next week. Is it possible by next week that there would be information, all of this could be brought forward at that time?
I would
Greater
hope so.
clarity?
I haven't contacted anybody from Centra to verify that, but you can certainly attempt it.
Very good.
And then request an extension next Monday if need be.
And so, Mr. Workup, at that time, if whatever, if Center is felt one way or the other, your recommendation would be kind of along the lines of what you've indicated so far, but at that time, it would be the council's decision, policy decision at that point. Is that correct?
And that's what I'm looking for at this point, is it supposed to be 15 years from today's date, plus 3, or 15 years from 3 years ago, plus 3?
And we need to make sure that Centra's got the same understanding.
Yeah, are we interested in a 15-year lease moving forward or 18-year lease?
Right.
I'm actually interested in moving this deal forward. We've had it in the works for over a year. So without saying anything more, at this point, I'll move to go along with the staff recommendation, and then we'll see what happens next week. Is that sufficient for tonight or not?
It's fine with me, and then come Monday, we'll have an answer.
But I think Mr. Workup...
Still don't know what to do.
Yeah, still doesn't know what to do. Are we interested in an 18-year lease from today or a 15-year lease?
So again, my initial statement was that I thought we were amending a 5-year lease and adding 10 years to that. So we weren't starting a new clock with 15 years moving forward from whatever future date. We were adding 10 years to the existing lease. That was my understanding all along. So my motion is given in that spirit.
So you are of the belief that we're asking for a 13-year lease or a 12-year lease? So we're 3 years in.
We're amending a 5-year lease to add 10 years to it. We're 3 years into that lease.
Right.
So we'd be looking at another 12 years with a 3-year renewal. So Social Detox, if they want, could get out of it in 12 years if they wanted, or they could continue for another 3 years at $1 a year. And I hope to be alive to seize the day, yes.
Clearly,
So that's my...
the most beneficial to Social Detox would be, as Mr. Workup talked about, the 15-year starts at closing.
Right.
And if that is
So-
Centra's understanding and they're fine with that, then we have nothing to argue about. But if they were under the conclusion as the first draft was written that it was 15 years, then that's the bone of contention that we need to confront here in the next week.
So are you asking me to...
No, I'm not.
amend my
I'm just
motion?
trying to wrap my arms around what we actually think is better for the Social Detox Center. To me, the longer we tie in at $1 a year, I'd like to see a 40-year lease myself, but I don't think Center would go for that. So I'd love to see us, if we're going to do a 15 from 3 years ago or today plus 3 years, why don't we just call it let's do an 18-year lease from today and move on.
And if Center is fine with that.
And if they're okay with that,
I'll amend my motion to go that route, and then we'll see what information we have a week from now, and I hope the sooner we move this building forward, the sooner we move this building forward, the better, yes.
there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
By Mr. Veen. Is there any other discussion? I actually have a question. What happens, let's assume we move forward and we get ourselves an 18-year lease and everything is great. And how many square feet does a Social Detox Center have approximately? A couple thousand, 10,000?
1,656.
Okay, so a hair under a couple thousand square feet and market rates at least $10 a foot downtown? Is it 20?
Well, who knows what it'll be in 15 or 18 years. and
Right,
that's
so
when-
it could be 25, it could be, we could be $500,000 in annual rent. How are we gonna pay for that? We have, Mr. Workup already pointed out, that Social Detox has no budget.
Correct.
So should we be adding this to our capital improvement plan and have a capital account for just such a thing so that we're saving money? So that in 18 years, we have money so we can at least help offset some of the annual costs?
Well, a quick reminder, this is a building we got for free, that's been equipped and set up for some very specific uses. They've been providing important social services in our downtown area. At this point, the city has already, in the time that we've delayed the sale, we've had to replace the boiler, do some work on an elevator. This is an old building. And we should always be thinking down the road, but in the meantime, we also have to be aware of the present, and we've ended up spending money on this building that's perhaps in excess of what you're talking about, fixing repairs so that we could finally sell this building. I'm anxious to get this moved off our books, this building.
I am too.
Good.
I don't think saving for future rent payments has anything to do with us selling the building. I think we should sell the building.
Good.
I just think that we should also be thinking about how we're going to pay Center Inc. for our monthly rent in 18 years.
Actually, for what it's worth, since we opened Social Detox, the city has opened LaGrave on First, the Housing First Permanent Supportive Housing. And just that one change in our social infrastructure has altered the dynamics around Social Detox. We still need the Social Detox Center, but if we were building it today, knowing what we know about the impact, the beneficial impact of LaGrave on First, we would likely be building a very different detox center. So trying to project what the needs of social detox will be in 10, 12, 15 years is difficult. And again, I'm interested in moving this deal along as you are too. Not to minimize your concern about the future, but it's difficult to predict such an unpredictable thing 15 years from now.
That's true, but would you agree that chances are we'll need a social detox center in 18 years?
Yes, but the mechanism for dealing with addictions, the substances that'll be abused, the best practices involved for dealing with those kinds of social issues, that's hard to predict.
Yeah, it's hard to predict. It's even harder to treat if you don't have a facility because you can't afford it.
Yeah, so best practices might look very different and may be a very different approach. But I'll change the motion again if you want.
There's no motion to change. I'm just saying maybe we should be thinking about putting money aside.
Yes, I don't know that's on the agenda at this point, but the JDA, no, this would be, we should take recommendations, policy recommendations from the health department about that. I think that's an excellent idea. That we should maybe direct health department staff to study that and see what recommendations they have for us. How's that one sound?
Yeah, that's fine, or we could work it into next year's budget, however anybody wants to do it, just an idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Good discussion. Item 2.4, bids for project 7950, shared use path on 17th Avenue South from 20th Street to 25th Street. Mr. Grasser.
Thank you, President.
Did we get good bids?
We did. We received bid. This, just a reminder, this is a project which we applied for federal funding on, a shared use path. The area described is basically in front of Red River High School at that stretch in there, upgrading the sidewalk to a shared use path. The DOT opened bids on Friday, and you should have an updated staff report today compared to what you may have looked at on Friday. So the updated staff report has the dollars in it. Apparent low bidder is OP Construction in the amount of $337,615.60. And we're recommending approval contingent upon concurrence by the North Dakota DOT.
Any comments? Mr. Weber moves. Second by Mr. Veen. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 2.5. Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Funding for 47th Avenue South Interchange Environmental Impact Study. Mr. Walker, good evening.
Good evening, Council President Sandy, members of the committee. Back in 2018, the city had requested funding from the North Dakota DOT to fund an environmental document to address congestion on 32nd Avenue. At that time, we believed that
congestion on 32nd Avenue could be relieved by constructing a interchange on I-29 at 47th Avenue South. And the typical funding for such a study would have a 10% city share, but we were told that if we wanted to be successful in our request, that we should offer a greater city funding share. So with that in mind, we had offered a 50% city funding share. We were informed after we submitted that by the DOT that they were unable to accommodate that funding request. Recently, however, the North Dakota DOT changed their mind and notified us that they would be prepared to begin environmental document on an interchange at 47th Avenue or near 47th Avenue and start studying that. And they wanted us to reaffirm our commitment to fund the study at the 50% level. And they wanted us to also confirm that should the study be approved, the environmental document be approved, and that the interchange justification report be approved, that we would preserve right-of-way necessary for the interchange. So, and that's the basis of why I'm here tonight, is to get that commitment. So back in 2017, if you recall, the MPO conducted a I-29 traffic operations study, and they indicated by 2025 that we would have problems with the interchange at 32nd Avenue. Part of it being that northbound traffic would start backing up into the actual interstate travel lanes just because of the amount of traffic. And there would be further congestion on different the on and off ramps at that interchange and at intersections along 32nd Avenue. And they further anticipated that by constructing an interchange at 47th Avenue would reduce that congestion by about 40%. So the environmental document that we're proposing to do would lay the groundwork for what the preferred alternative would be and where the location of the interchange would be. And that if it's approved, we could then preserve right-of-way for the interchange. As you drive out into that area, you can see that development is progressing south and getting closer to the interchange. And at some point in time, if we don't act soon, development will continue to proceed in that direction. And once development occurs, there's no chance that we would ever put an interchange at that location. So if we were to proceed with this, we would assume that the funding would come from the Street and Infrastructure Fund 4815. And the funding was obviously not included in the 2019 budget or the 2020 budget because we didn't anticipate that it would be a project that would come forward. So I've talked with finance, and they're just suggesting that we would do a budget amendment as needed, if that be the 19 budget or the 20 budget. The DOT has not yet determined the schedule for proceeding with this. They're just informing us now that they're willing to proceed and they want our commitment. The I-29 traffic analysis that was done by the MPO back in 2016 indicated that the environmental documentation would be at about a $2 million cost estimate, and the actual interchange would be about a $37.5 million cost. So with that, staff is recommending that the city authorized funding for the environmental document with a city share at 50% at a not to exceed amount of $1.5 million, and that we approve any necessary budget amendments. I indicated that previous study indicated that the environmental analysis would be about $2 million. I'm asking for a not to exceed amount of $1.5 million as a city share. The DOT has not come back and indicated what they believe their cost is going to be, and that's why I've asked for a little bit more than what the estimated amount is.
Mr. Walker, thank you. This is a continuation of the discussion we had, wondering when you came forward and asked us what were our thoughts on moving this forward, and we had, I think, indicated that this is important for our community. I didn't realize it was $1.5 million, but not to exceed. It's always good to make sure that we have the resources available. And Ms. Mock?
Have we ever gone back and reviewed the projections versus the actual traffic counts on 32nd Avenue? I'm wondering if we need to check that to make sure that those projections are actually going at the rate we were expecting them to go. I'm a little concerned about spending considerable money on a solution for 32nd Avenue congestion when we have so many changes taking place on 32nd Avenue. I mean, we've had a lot of businesses close. We've got a lot of areas that I think will be, I guess, slated for redevelopment in the next few years. So, you know, this is $1.5 million, but then I'm concerned about the $37 million that would be coming for such a large project when, you know, I know many of us have some other large-scale projects that we know people in the community would like to see move forward.
So we have not gone back and reevaluated the traffic volumes based upon what the previous projections were. But we do know that the traffic congestion on 32nd Avenue is significant. And we know that development keeps on going to the south, and that that businesses will likely continue to be on 32nd Avenue. I know that previous evaluations were, you know, could you solve the congestion on 32nd Avenue with adding additional lanes and making a 6-lane, and they had problems making that work as well. But if you look at where the interchanges are, I mean, we had one, you know, on 32nd and Demers and Gateway, and then we don't have another one until we get down to Thompson, and we're looking, or excuse me, at Thompson, correct. But, you know, we were also looking at potentially putting one at Merrifield as well, but it's a long stretch between 32nd Avenue and Merrifield.
If I can tack on to that too, those are good questions, and the MPO actually has kind of, in the course of time, done 2 separate projections as to the need for the work on 32nd. On the interstate report, I think there was a little more, at that time, things were a little more robust. There was an anticipation of growth and traffic and things like that, and that targeted more the 2025 congestion problem. But if you recall, in the long-range transportation plan, I think they downgraded some of those traffic projections, which is, I think, what you're referring to on, you know, the retail growth and things like that. It didn't eliminate the need for the project, but it started scaling the dates of the bigger problems back. And again, if you remember, like 32nd, if you think about that, if you've watched it out there, there's a lot of truck traffic. So I think what's starting to impact and drive some of that is the slow nature of trucks starting and stopping and things like that. And that's where they're concerned about the congestion back on the interstate. So the traffic volumes on 32nd is one thing, but also I think the mix of traffic is driving part of that need for the project. Again, if you start thinking about the timelines, if you assume that they start the environmental assessment in 2020, which they may or may not, but I think they will, that's a 2 or 3 year process. Now you're out to 2022, 2023, maybe till you've got a finalized report. Then you start asking for funding. That may be out another 3 to 5 years to get the funding. So although we're starting today and the problem isn't here today, we're pursuing a solution that may not be able to be delivered until the late 20s, something like that. So that's just the long leg nature of these studies versus getting construction going. Don't know if I said too much or too little, but.
Ms. Mock?
So 2 questions. Could we, for next week, could we just get like a quick review of what the projections were versus what the traffic counts were, just so we can kind of have that check for kind of where we're at with that? And do we have a purpose and need developed for 47th that's driving this project?
Again, the purpose and need would be defined more in the actual EIS. That'll be one of those decision things. But again, that they've identified that there's congestion will occur on 32nd to the point they just can't throw lanes at it. They tried putting 6 lanes on it and it didn't solve the problem. They tried putting 8 lanes on it. And I think the problem is you've got so many turning movements and things going on in there. Your traffic process starts to break down. So the solution at the interstate study report really said you just need to be able to peel some of that traffic off in a different location.
Okay.
And 47th was the location of choice. Quite frankly, if we don't do it there, it's probably going to be Merrifield Road. I would guess is going to be the next opportunity for an interchange.
But as you mentioned, the truck traffic, would that be a better solution to get truck traffic out of that area?
That would be it's kind of like the bridge discussion. Merrifield Road would be, for one thing, the DOT is kind of, at one point in time anyway, tied the Merrifield Road into a Merrifield Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at it as having a traffic bypass, which would help do some of eliminate some of the truck traffic and ag traffic. But the farther south it goes, the less impactful benefit it has to 32nd corridor. It's pretty much the same discussion as we have on the bridges. And again, if you think about trucks, a lot of our truck traffic is being driven by the service centers for trucks, the fuel and that kind of thing. And then we have the industrial park. And so a number of those truck traffic is going to need to get on and off at 32nd because we have those I'll call it service centers in those locations.
Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. So this is an update from the MPO from Mr. Haugen on October 8th. Regarding the 32nd, and this is consistent with what you said, but I'll just read it quick. Regarding the 32nd Avenue congestion, also known as the 47th Avenue interchange, the justification for a congestion need was based upon older data. 32nd Avenue is a major retail corridor, and as the data for retail jobs showed, the growth of traffic is not as fast as the I-29 study forecast. Therefore, the congestion need is delayed. While there might be other reasons for an interchange, such as added retail corridor growth, the congestion needs could be satisfied by a $1 million spot improvement as identified in the I-29 study. This $1 million, together with the next year's $7 million plus safety improvements, should last well into the 2030s, is Mr. Haugen's suggestion here. And one of the things that I feel quite strongly about is that if we continue to have 3 or 4 infrastructure projects as our priority, we're going to receive funding on none of those. This one feels like one that could reasonably be put off for some time. So there's that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Veen, comments?
Yeah, a couple of items here. I think a lot of good information been discussed, and there's some valid points made. One of the things that we've talked about is the interchange at 47th has the highest potential benefit to 32nd. The further south, again, you go, the less benefit you're going to have on 32nd. I was kind of intrigued when we thought we weren't even going to be able to get funding to do a study the interchange, and that we have had kind of a fairly recent change from the DOT to do this. And even though if 50% is $1 million, I thought I also saw that the cost share with the DOT would be a 90-10. And so a $37.5 million interchange only costs us $3.7 million.
Plus maybe $1 million.
And plus $1 million. So for $4.7 million, we get an interchange. And that's not only for now, you can reserve that right away even if it doesn't happen, and we keep this thing going. So if it wasn't for that, that type of a cost share, I'd probably be more concerned. But I think it's an opportunity that we probably can't afford to not go with, is where I'm with having to go with the study.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Ms. Marshall?
Yeah, I think that preserving the right-of-way is a really compelling reason to go ahead with this and to do it sooner than later. We certainly see from the bridge discussions that
once you start to develop the area around the vicinity of a major project, you run into way, way more complications. So for that reason alone, I would be in favor of this, and I think Mr. Vian has made some real compelling arguments as well. Wondering with just the offset of, say it's $1 million coming out of an existing fund, what would be the impact that you might project on other projects that the city is planning for next year?
That was a good question. I don't think there's going to be any impact on the projects for next year. Maureen can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did, if memory serves me correctly, we did plug the EIS money into our long-term CIP. We had it in like 19. We're carrying it for a couple of years. And then when the DOT said, it's not even on our near-term horizon, we took it, and instead of removing it, we said, we're going to take another run at it farther down the pike. So in the long-term cash flow, we essentially have this $1 million in our vision. It's just not in 19 or 20 timeframe. So in the meantime, you'll make up the bounce with cash flow.
Sure. Sure. Second question, and maybe others know the answer to this, but do we know why the DOT changed their mind? I mean, it's good for us, we're glad, but...
They've been getting pressure for a number of years from a number of sources on the interchange, and maybe something penetrated some bubble someplace. I really don't know. The letter was a complete surprise.
Thank you.
Any others? Yeah, I think kudos goes to both our engineering department and our finance department for good financial management and planning for this sort of thing. The cost benefit that you get from a project like this with the split with the state, we will never get a deal like this on this project probably ever again if we don't move forward on it. So, sir. Anyone interested in moving? Moved by Marshall. Yep, Mr. Weigel, do you have a comment?
I would just like to add something real quick. I'm glad the city is thinking long term. I think that's great. But again, the issue that I have is we're looking at a long-term issue that's going to come up in 10, 15 years, whatever it might be. But yet we currently have an issue at 42nd and Demers that we aren't addressing. So to spend up to $1.5 million on an issue that hasn't popped up yet, I'm not a fan of, and I'd like to see us set a priority list for those 3 or 4 major projects that we could have down the road and work from that before committing up to $1.5 million.
Mr. Grasser.
If I may comment on some of that, I think a suggestion is that one of the next steps on the 42nd underpass is grade separation is actually to go back in and update that study. We're farther along because we had some of the base study done, but we're not ready to move towards construction. So we may want to carry both of these just because there's so much lag between studies and actual money and things like that. I mean, I think that's something we should look at. I suggest to the council that we would look at in the upcoming month or so is looking at reinitializing that study, so we're carrying both.
I'm sure
one may disappear.
Mr. Gangler is very excited
you
about
never
that.
know. Yeah.
Mr. Weber?
Thank you again. So what I'm hearing is that one of the reasons to do this is because of congestion concerns on 32nd, and that one of the major causes of that congestion is truck traffic coming through. And so I'm wondering, have we pursued any community input on this? This would be bringing truck traffic through existing residential neighborhoods, and it seems that we should be directing truck traffic to our industrial park and along Highway 2. Last week we debated for quite a while spending probably less than $100,000 to study a 4th neighborhood bridge. Now it seems that we're ready to spend 10 times that amount to study an interchange that threatens to increase truck traffic through a primarily residential area. So I'm concerned about this. I'm seeing the greatest need is for either the grade separation or the neighborhood bridge. The neighborhood bridge is my priority. And with that, I'm ready to vote.
Mr. Grasser?
I have to apologize if I haven't framed some of the questions on trucks correctly. If I can clarify, things that drive some of that traffic demand are the types of vehicles, the volume of vehicles, things like that. The trucks have destination points very close to 32nd Avenue. I apologize if I inferred that the trucks were going to transfer to 47th. I'm not envisioning really that, because the destination points at 32nd will continue to drive them to 32nd. But what you're trying to do now is take some of the vehicles, the passenger type vehicles, out of that mix, lessen some of that mix. And again, I'm giving you just broad discussions on it, but I apologize. I'm not suggesting that we're rerouting truck traffic down 47th.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Mr. Veen?
Yeah, in response to Mr. Weber's issue, I understand what you're talking about. I could see us, we've talked about the 3 major projects and trying to prioritize them. I could see us intentionally prioritizing this as number 3, because it's going to be so many years out, and we may try to do the other 2 projects first, but at least this is reserving the right of way and having the capacity to do that, even if it's 20 years from now. As it may be, I guess we'll see how traffic progresses and whatever, but I don't think that this has to necessarily be out there to try to come in before a bridge, South End Bridge. I mean, some of those are more imminent. This is not imminent, but it's not immediate, it's not urgent, but it's important. And that's why I think we need to do this now and then still look at that sequencing down the road.
And that actually gets to the heart of my concern. If we continue to have 3 or 4 priorities, until we get to one, we're going to get none, is my concern. So, thanks. Yes, Mr. Yes.
May I pontificate, and I apologize, but you've maybe heard me say this, and I'm not maybe very clear on it, on bridges. We think we have 4 choices of bridges. But if we do hydraulic studies, we do some of these other studies, we may find that our universe of choices is narrower than what we are currently struggling with today. That same concept can apply to the 47th interchange. We may go through this EIS, and part of that's an interstate justification report. We could get to the end of this, and the federal highway says, no. Now your decisions as to what to prioritize and where to go in the future just became smaller. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying we're struggling because we have so many things in the mix. If we can provide data that helps eliminate choices, whether we like them or not, eliminate choices, your choices then become clear. Lack of alternatives defines where you're going to go. So I'll just throw that out there for thought.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Any other comments? There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We're tied. We'll refer it to City Council with no recommendation. Item 2.6, amendments to various codes, building codes, plumbing codes, fire codes, and mechanical codes. Good evening, Ms. Collins.
Council President Sandy and council members, I'm here today to present the amendments, proposed amendments to the codes. Every 3 years, we go through the codes, just like every community around the country does. The state of North Dakota, we are involved in their code adoption also, and those are communities that don't adopt their own code, adopt the state code. So we pattern ours against what the state does also. Along with, you'll see the fire codes in here also. We work very close with the fire department, the fire marshals, fire chief to do that also. And they have worked with the state fire marshal's office. We have the building code, the residential code, the energy code, the existing building code, the mechanical code, the fuel gas code, and the fire code. And then there's an electrical code, and that's a state code. So we just make sure that we are in step with the state on that. The plumbing code, we make sure that we're in step with the state plumbing board and that code. And then you'll see in here there's a slight modification for that also. So these are, there's a lot of amendments here. They're very similar to what we did 3 years ago. Sometimes the national codes change drastically. This cycle, they did not. So they're very similar. If I'm a builder out there, I probably wouldn't notice many changes. And with that, I can explain more, whatever you like.
Want any additional information on each of the code changes, or?
How urgent is this matter? Is this time sensitive in some way?
We like to get them adopted by the first of the year.
Mr. Sandy, I believe that you were moving towards some review of building costs in our community, and that might include some review of these codes. Is that relevant to this discussion or not?
I think, yeah, well, great question. Of course, probably, but I think our inspections department is trying to follow best practices on these issues.
Yeah, if you want me to speak to that?
Sure, certainly.
Yes, Mr. Weber, one of the examples I can give is the energy code. Okay, the energy code is extremely important, but in this part of the country, we've always had a sense of insulation and making sure that our homes are very energy efficient. So we have not gone along with the national trend, and every 3 years up it by a couple R values, or whatever you're familiar with, I'm not sure, an inch of insulation or whatever. We haven't done that. We've kept with the builders and talked to the builders and what should we be doing and how we should be doing it, because some of that, just adding an R factor every 3 years of 2, how would you incorporate that into your wall construction? Be very difficult, could be very costly. So we don't do that. We say your R value is an R19 instead of going up to an R21. Now, is the wall an R21? Probably is already, but we specifically state this is how you should build your wall this way, so you don't have to encounter a bunch of additional expenses. And as far as the rest of the code, it's the national code. It's the same as the state code. The state did the exact same thing with the energy code. So I don't think anything that you would find in the adoption would increase the cost of construction. Now, a few cycles ago, with the sheetrock issue and the basement, those issues, that did increase it. We could, instead of a radon system being an option, we could make it mandatory if we'd like, but the state did not, so we did not. Because that would add to the cost of a new home, probably anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000, every new home. So I hope that helps.
Mr. V?
And the other thing I was going to say, so have the boards, like the plumbing board and all of those reviewed these codes?
I apologize for that. Yes, I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
Yes.
So none of these are just being, I mean,
no.
We
go through, yes.
Each of the appropriate boards that we've
Correct.
appointed.
Mechanical board and the Board of Appeals. I did not bring it through the plumbing board because the plumbing board, there is no change. I mean, we follow the state.
And a number of these, like the fire codes, they're fire safety codes. They're the ones that assure that when we go in buildings, we have a level of safety that is important for all of our well-being, right?
Correct.
And so not having codes, of course, would be not good.
Right. Well, there's all kinds of funding attached to not having codes nowadays, too.
And the codes we have here have gone through the appropriate boards, so those recommendations come toward us to now accept them as a city.
Mm-hmm. Each of the boards has individuals on there with their professional expertise, architects, engineers, or on the plumbing or mechanical side, expertise in engineering.
Very good. And Mr. Weber?
My apologies for drawing this out. We're all wanting to get to dinner sometime soon, but I recall the need for extra drywall in the basements was a safety issue brought forward by the fire department. I'm a little concerned about the energy and radon issues that you raise. It's my understanding that we have some of the highest radon rates in the state and in the country here in the Red River Valley. And so when I consider the expense of cancers related to radon, the savings of $2,000 or $3,000 seems minor in comparison to the cost of those health concerns. Similarly, environmental issues around energy efficiency of buildings might add some cost up front, but we're always looking at the cost of a building over at least the first 20 years or so, and so maybe those heating costs. But for now, I'm guessing that we could approve this tonight, and if we have a review and decide to alter the way that Grand Forks addresses some of these codes, we could change that in the future as well, right? Yeah. And so I hope that these will be some of the things that are considered in your pursuit of housing-related costs, and I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber, second by Marshall. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.7, reappointment to Board of Appeals and appointment to Board of Adjustments. Any concerns about appointing Larry Bolts to the Board of Adjustments to complete the term of Mr. Anderson and then reappoint all the members of the Board of Appeals? Mr. Veen moves approval, second by Mock. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.8, easement for electrical utility service at the water treatment plant with Nodak Electric. Ms. Barbie.
Good evening. This evening, I'm just bringing before easement with Nodak, and that they will provide the permanent electricity at the water treatment plant. So this easement is in addition to the current easement that we have with them. It's for their future substation and then the land adjacent to that.
Any questions or concerns, comments? Moved by Weber, second by Mock. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.9, budget amendment, Fire Department fiscal year 2019 State Homeland Security Grant Program. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the council. Every year, the fire department applies for grant funding through the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services for sustainability money for the regional hazardous material and structural collapse response teams. And that's what this funding is. It was an application that was made. The city received $106,946 through this program for that sustainability. It's used for education, training, replacement of equipment, and then any backfill overtime wages. So the recommendation is to approve the budget adjustment for that amount. There is no match on this grant.
Very good. My favorite kind of grant. Moved by Veen, second by Marshall. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. We have no other business under announcements. Today is Indigenous People Day in Grand Forks, and they are having a celebration at the Fire Hall Theater right downstairs outside of City Hall, so people are welcome to come down and check that out. Also, we are getting on towards census season, so people should be expecting to receive their census packets in the mail, perhaps a save-the-date postcard or some other thing that tells them how to be counted. It's very important for our community and the state of North Dakota to make sure that all of our people are counted in that. I also wanted to note that our Public Works Department has been doing a splashing job making sure to keep the water moving with all of the water in our drainage system right now. It's obvious that although perhaps we have some infiltration into our system, people in Grand Forks are routing their sump pumps down into the city sewers. It's pretty obvious based upon the sheer volume of water that we've got. So everybody should be reminded to vent their water out into the street rather than into the city sewer. So anything else for the good of the order? Mr. Weber?
May. Mr. Phelan, thanks for the update you gave us. Would you mind speaking for a moment so that folks at home can know what the city's currently doing and what we're anticipating? These are unusual times. This is an unusual set of circumstances. It's hard to predict, but any information you could give. And then I'm also curious about, I don't know what we can do as a city, except we should at least talk about it. We're heavily dependent on the ag sector, and our farmers in this region are looking at some trying times. If you could speak to those.
Sure. Council President Sandy and Councilmember Weber. 3 updates to that point. Number 1, Public Works. They are partnering with the Park District and picking up tree debris on the berms. And so that's going on as we speak. As just to clarify, the Grand Forks Park District, they kind of own and manage the berm trees. But when things get tough, like over this past weekend, Public Works helps him out on picking up the debris. So that's going on, and those 2 crews really work well together, even though they're from separate governmental units. We also
on that, any guidance for homeowners on what they should be doing, shouldn't be doing?
Sure. I think the point, number 1, if you can bring them to the berm, not in the alley, but bring them to your berm, and that's where a lot of your trees are anyway. Number 2, if you can take them, I would take them out to Public Works. Would be one opportunity where we're going to pick them up in a larger volume. And if you can even do better, take them to the landfill. Then we don't have to do transport or anything. But those are the 3 options: your berm, Public Works, landfill. I would say it's going to take a few weeks to pick up all the tree debris. We're pondering doing maybe some leaf pickup next week, but that's to be determined. It might become more of a tree pickup than much of a leaf pickup. We'll see how things go. Maybe everything turns around. So just so you know, we have lots of crews. The other thing we are currently still doing is over this past weekend, just because we had that initial rainstorm, 5+ inches, and then we've had some successive rainstorms where we picked up flood debris from people's basements. We're still doing that from a Public Works perspective, just so you know. We're picking up, still picking up flood-related debris. We're picking up tree debris, and we'll have to see about leaves. And so over this past, which kind of leads to the next thing about water. So our water folks are working real hard. Remember, we have a stormwater system that takes the water off the streets and puts it to the river. We have a flood protection system that has pump stations, and then we have a wastewater system that Mr. Sandy was talking about. And so our wastewater system is seeing a lot of infiltration and inflow into it. And I think a lot of that is related to just the high groundwater that we have right now. And there's cracks in people's services, there's cracks in the pipes, and it gets into our sanitary sewer system. There's also, as Mr. Sandy said, sump pumps. And in some of the older neighborhoods, you can always tell when it rains because those pump stations peak pretty fast. And so we know that there's, historically they were plumbed in and they weren't plumbed out over the years. So we're struggling with that. So whatever people can do, as Mr. Sandy said, to get your sump pump outside the sanitary sewer system. I'll just give you some rough numbers. With East Grand Forks, now that's interconnected with our system, we're probably between 8 million gallons per day. That's what we should be on an average day. And now we're well above 20 million gallons per day. And so that's putting a lot of pressure on our systems. Thankfully, our crews are working hard, our infrastructure is working hard, but it's been working too hard for too long right now, and so that we're concerned about that. So we're continuing to manage that. The other part our Public Works, or our Water Works folks are working on is that we have activated some aspects of our flood protection system. And so I think we have 12 flood stations along the levee system. We've activated, I think as of today, 6 of those flood stations. And so when we get in and around 40 feet in Grand Forks, that means some of the flood stations have to be activated. So 6 of the 12 are activated along our flood protections from the north end of Grand Forks all the way, to the south end of Grand Forks strategically. So that means we close the gates, we activate the pumps, and so that any of the water that comes from inside wants to get to the river, we can pump it over the levee system in there. So we have all of our crews working in Public Works and water, and I think things are going well right now. And even though people are getting water in their basements, we're trying to stave off anything worse from happening right now in Grand Forks, and that's really critically important. So while we're kind of managing things hour to hour and day to day as we move forward, what I've heard that was different this weekend, which surprised me a little bit, you know, we had that rainstorm where some people did not have water issues, but then they suddenly got water issues this weekend, and that has to be from the groundwater table really creeping up into people's foundations now. And where they didn't see anything after, they should have, if they had gotten water in their basements this past weekend, they should have certainly gotten something. So it must be that the ground is so saturated now, and it's reached an equilibrium. So people throughout the whole community are seeing water in their basements. So it needs to dry out, and I know people are frustrated, and we're doing everything that we can as we move forward and trying to communicate, but it's really impacting now throughout the whole city of Grand Forks.
We think of flooding as overland water. In some ways, we're being flooded from the ground up right now. Is there federal relief funds that we should at some point be looking at?
Councilmember Weber, I think number one, we have declared it, the mayor has declared a disaster, or declared an emergency, not a disaster, thankfully, an emergency. And that goes for 30 days. But we did that back in September when we got that 5+ inches of rain. And so on Monday, we'll come back to you and have that emergency. It has, after 30 days, the city council has to extend it. So we're going to come back to city council on Monday and extend that emergency. So that if there are some things that we can be eligible moving forward because of the water impacts, I think longer term, we needed to look at what ways we can do to assist with some of the things that are going on longer term. And as Mr. Sandy said, that probably relates to what we can do with sump pumps. It relates to what we can do for storm drainage internally, and all those kinds of, those are longer term things that we can take a look at. So we're just trying to get back past this, I'll call it emergency, so that we can start trying to get ahead of this issue. And I think we always have to remember this is historic. It's been a historic month of weather, and we're just living through it. So we got to take that in perspective too.
Shervin?
Mr. Phelan, do we kind of have a bit of a dilemma? I know, Mr. Sandy, we talked about pumping our sump pumps into the sanitary sewer, and we shouldn't do that, but it's getting cold and it's freezing out there, and the lines that we're sometimes pumping it into can freeze. And then we have a problem. If your outfalls are frozen, then you can't pump out, and you're not supposed to pump into the sanitary sewer. I don't have an answer for that, but it seems like, especially as time goes on, in some areas we know are more prone to have high water table than others. Vale and Glen Circle have always done that. Some of them have run year-round almost, and some of them not. But it's really hard when winter's coming to know how to plumb your sump pump.
I think what we're dealing with now, it was a little bit strange having a flood protection preparation meeting. I mean, it felt like it was April, but it's October, and we're going into winter, not summer. And so we're really in strange times right now. As we move forward, there's no really great answers. We're just trying to get the best answers we can. And when in doubt in our sanitary sewer system, if things become too overwhelming, what we do is we have to divert some of those pump stations to the river. And then we have to ask, we do it and then let the state know. And so I think with this recent events that we had over the weekend, we're not doing that yet, but that's constantly on our mind, is that we don't want any catastrophic failures. And so we're always monitoring that with crews that are out and about, because we don't want anything really bad to happen in our community, and we'd rather divert. We have a wastewater treatment plant that's mechanical. And so what happens is the pump, we have I think 45 pump stations. It gets pumped to our wastewater treatment plant, and our treatment plant's at a higher level than our collection system. And so what we're doing right now is we have these lagoons that are out there, and people wonder why we have them. Right now we're diverting a lot of the flow to those treatment lagoons, just because it's easier and less stressful on our system to divert the flow to our treatment lagoons, because they're at a lower elevation than our treatment plant. And plus we're just treating a lot of groundwater. And so we don't need to throw all that water through our treatment plant when we can treat some of that water through our lagoon system. And it's just easier on our collection system here in the city. So there's lots of moves we're making, and we just need some relief so that we can do some catch up.
I believe the governor Related to your concern about our local farmers, I believe the governor made a disaster declaration, and they'll be looking for federal funds to help the farmers in North Dakota. So I believe he did that today, as a matter of fact. Mr. Phelan, I really appreciate all the work that the city's been doing, picking up flood debris, trying to help pick up branches. With the fact that there's snow on the ground, and I've been holding out trying to mow my grass one more time, but it's highly unlikely I'm going to anytime soon. Why don't we turn all of our grass collection sites into branch collection sites? Let people just throw the branches in and save us some of the trouble of having to drive around and collect all of them from people's berms. And maybe that'd be an easy step to help relieve some of the pressure on our people.
Yeah, Mr. Senator, I think that's a good point. As long as we don't create too many, some of our more residential areas, so people get concerned about, too many trucks and that sort of thing. We've been using I'm going to say, is it Fifth Avenue?
Yeah, over by the football.
Over by the football?
Just over the bridge
I think we can look at some strategic ones that are larger, not in residential neighborhoods. And
I'm just thinking we're going to confuse people, because people are throwing branches in all over the place right now anyway.
Yeah.
To me, it just seems logical that we should say, hey, next week, brush debris is allowed in every container in the city, but Monday through Friday, and get it there and get it done, or something like that.
No.
I'll leave it up to you guys.
I think it's a good
figure
strategy.
out.
We'll get through this week, and maybe later this week we'll reevaluate, and that's a good point to ponder. So I thank you on that. I think to the point of the farmers, even though we may get, I think the concern with the economy is that crystal sugar and the potato industry is a huge industry, and even if they get relief, they do create economic churn in our community by doing something and just not getting a payment of disaster relief. So I think we should need to monitor that, because there's a lot of economic spend that happens because things are happening and things are being processed. So we should keep our eye on that.
Any other thoughts for the good of the order? Yes, Ms. Marshall?
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any update on the water issues at the Vail, in the Vail Circle area where we heard from those residents last week.
I'm not sure how well they did. I'm not certain how they did over the weekend with the addition, but I've discussed with Mr. Grasser. We're going to put our heads together and take a look at that study, and as part of the longer term strategy, that'll come back to you. We didn't want to bring it back. I think we heard the people. We need to come up with some strategic solutions and way to fund not only the infrastructure part of that. So we'll come back to them. We have a further story. We'll make sure we invite the residents, and as we move forward with a longer term strategy.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Veen to adjourn, second by Marshall. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Excel Energy, responsible by nature.
Brantley Gilbert returns to Grand Forks. Fired Up Tour 2020 with special guests Chase Rice and Brandon Lay. Alara Center, Saturday, May 2nd. Get tickets now at Ticketmaster.com. The brand new album Fire and Brimstone drops everywhere October 4th. Brantley Gilbert, live in concert. Check more at BrantleyGilbert.com.